So Biden has now leaked to the Atlantic magazine that he will be announcing his run for president next Wednesday. Now, my guess is that since Biden is pretty much at the top of the polls with Bernie, he thinks that he can come in as the non-socialist alternative, perhaps, and try and take up that whole, I guess, what's now considered the moderate wing of the Dems. I think he certainly rivals Bernie as far as middle-class appeal goes, and in that sense, both Biden and Bernie would make for good challengers to Trump, because, of course, one of Trump's big strengths in 2016 was that compared to Hillary Clinton, who was, a walking receptacle for corporate interests, Trump came across as someone who was independent and willing to stand up for the working man and not for, the man on Wall Street. But Biden and Bernie also have that sort of a trait. I think that it's less credible as far as Biden's concerned, considering that he was in Washington for most of his life. I believe he was elected to the Senate when he was 29, and he was elected to the House when he was like 22, so, or 25, so like right around the legal age for both of them. So you don't get more of a career politician than Biden, but for whatever reason, he's been able to portray himself over the years as, Mr. Unions and all that, and old school 70s sort of, Democrat politics. And thanks to this working class appeal, he may be able to penetrate a little better into western Pennsylvania, which the Democrats have been struggling with in recent years, and of course struggled so much as to give President Trump the win in Pennsylvania back in 2016. Biden's announcement video was supposedly filmed near Scranton, Pennsylvania, so it seems he's pretty resonant to the fact that that is a key area for him. The working class areas of western Pennsylvania have noticeably shifted red in the last few years. The other two places where I think Biden will really make a difference versus Trump when compared to Hillary are Michigan and Wisconsin. Not only did Hillary not visit Wisconsin, she, frankly, again, comes across as a corporate elitist. And so to someone who lives in the Rust Belt, somebody like Hillary Clinton just doesn't seem to have any interest in helping them with any of their problems. At least Trump gave lip service to the problems of people in the Rust Belt. So while I think that Trump actually has strengthened his hand a bit in the Rust Belt and will most certainly win Ohio, and he will have trouble winning Michigan and Wisconsin, though I think it is still possible for Trump. I think that if Biden gets in, Pennsylvania is essentially can be secured in the blue column, because Pennsylvania was a very tough win for Trump. No Republican had won in Pennsylvania since, I believe, George H.W. Bush in 1989 or 88. And the people in Pennsylvania are sort of blue enough in orientation to where if you give them a known quantity who's not quite so offensive like Joe Biden, that I think they'll be happy to switch back to the blue column. But I think because Biden was vice president, he'll have trouble in Michigan and Wisconsin because a lot of these people, I think, view those 8 years, just by virtue of it being such a long time, as a time when they could have been helped by Obama and Biden, and in which they were not. So though while Obama is generally regarded as pretty positive, Biden does have the burden of having to defend pretty much every last thing that happened during the Obama administration and everything that people associate with it. Of course, it would be putting the cart before the horse for me to focus entirely on the general election in this video, since Biden has only announced that he's running in the primary. He has not secured that position yet, and I think that he probably doesn't serve the best chance of being able to secure the nomination. Though he is polling pretty high, I think that once Biden gets into the race, it will become clear to most Democrats just how distant he is from the current party. The thing is about being vice president is that you don't necessarily have to say a whole lot, and people will essentially impute their attitude towards the president onto you. This is how George H.W. Bush won the presidency the first time, was because when he ran, he essentially, people imputed their views of Reagan, which Reagan was pretty popular at the time, onto him. So he was essentially able to capitalize on all that goodwill that Reagan built up. But George H.W. Bush didn't have a particularly tough primary, so he didn't necessarily have to say a whole lot that could have alienated people from him. Biden, however, will have to make his case before a massive Democrat field, which where people are, already taking jabs at each other pretty openly. Biden will have to defend not only Obama's positions, which should be pretty easy for him, but defend his own positions, which frankly, are a bit different from what is in vogue at the moment. Now, for example, what's he going to do? How does he respond to all of Bernie's calls for essentially, moderate social democracy, which despite Bernie, couching all of his programs in the language of socialism and sort of acting like a good old-fashioned 1960s Marxist, he's actually just sort of center-left by European standards, even by the standards of, the 1870s. But since Biden portrays himself as sort of the more to the right of Bernie, as a more centrist candidate, how is he going to come up with alternatives to Bernie's program? Because I doubt anyone really wants to run on the status quo as far as Obamacare is concerned. But then again, if he just adopts Bernie's program, well, then what's the difference between him and Bernie? How is he more moderate? What's so special about Biden? Why wouldn't we just vote for Bernie and get the real thing? I think Biden has a serious problem that he much more cares about being president than he does advocating any particular ideas. So he's more open to changing his ideas, which does not suit his image that he's trying to portray of him being sort of, the straight man, straight-laced, and no nonsense. Because that means that during this primary, he's going to have to get slippery and try and adjust when he doesn't think that his messaging is working out well. I think that what Biden really should do is develop a platform before he announces and then stick by it all the way through and let the chips fall where they may. But that's the problem. It's just like with somebody who goes into a negotiation and is committed to not leaving the table without a deal. You're not going to end up with a very good deal. You have to be willing to walk away from the table. You have to be willing to lose. Because if you're not willing to lose, a more principled candidate like Bernie will be able to exploit that weakness and trample all over you. They'll be able to get you to say a bunch of different things that you don't mean because you're trying to just get elected. Much in the same way that Trump walked all over Hillary. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned old Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Buttigieg is like a younger, gayer Biden. Buttigieg went to Harvard, and he's pretty much a good CIA stooge and will do, whatever he can to ensure that the wars continue, because, of course, that's what a moderate means in the Democratic Party. So I think Biden runs the risk of Buttigieg crowding a little bit into his lane, certainly not overtaking him, but stripping off enough support from Biden so as to put Bernie into the first place spot. Because that's always a big part of the calculation with these Democrat or Republican primaries, is you have to look at the candidates in the race who are kind of similar, who are running in the same lanes, if they sort of cannibalize each other's support and put someone who is not like them at all in the top spot. Oh, and did I mention that Pete is gay, supposedly, so he shouldn't have the same Me Too problems that Biden does currently. Although it looks like that the Me Too stuff with Biden has been swept under the rug. They had their controversy, a couple weeks before he announced, so he was able to get that out of the way, and now it's old news. If the Me Too stuff came, in November during the general election, Biden would have been in trouble, but, because this came before he even announced, now it's old news and nobody's going to want to talk about it. So now I guess we'll just watch for Biden to announce and see how the polls react. I'm sure I'll be revisiting the topic of the Democratic primary in sometime in the next couple weeks. So please do stay tuned. I do upload daily videos, typically on foreign policy. I'm a pretty anti-war guy, so if you tend to agree with that sort of perspective, or even if you don't, you're interested in hearing it, I'd appreciate you subscribing and clicking that bell, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. Oh, and if you got anything of value from this video, I'd appreciate you clicking the like button. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.